Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Monday, June the 27th, 2022. Let's begin with DR3. In the wake of the repeal of Roe v. Wade, y'all know what DR3 means, right? Dems are the real racists. I guess Ann Coulter is still pushing this, and I must confess that I shamefully engaged in this kind of thing, back in the 1990s. But then I abandoned it because it's pointless. It has no political value. And, oh, yes, do you know that it was all these Republicans in the 1960s who were responsible for the passage of the Civil Rights Act? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. However, there are two black justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, and one of them is a right-wing Republican named Clarence Thomas, and he has become especially unpopular with the elite after last week's verdict. This is from Amanda Prestigiacomo from the Daily Wire. Actor Samuel L. Jackson Friday launched a racial attack against Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas after the court overruled abortion decisions in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, effectively kicking abortion restrictions back to the states. Jackson posted to Twitter, "How's Uncle Clarence feeling about overturning Loving versus Virginia?" Uncle Clarence seems to be a reference to Uncle Tom, a racial term often used to slander Black Americans who buck the mainstream narrative. Merriam-Webster defines Uncle Tom as a Black person who is overeager to win the approval of whites. In the same tweet, Jackson took another racial shot at Thomas, apparently for marrying a white woman, Ginny Thomas. Loving v. Virginia, decided in 1967, struck down state laws banning interracial marriages. Thomas notably wrote in his concurrence to Justice Samuel Alito's majority opinion in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization that the High Court should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. "We have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents," Thomas said. "After overruling these demonstrably erroneous decisions, the question would remain whether other constitutional provisions guarantee the myriad rights that our substantive due process cases have generated." Obergefell v. Hodges, decided in 2015, found that the right to marry was guaranteed to same-sex couples. Lawyer Jenna Ellis argued in 2018 that originalist judges would find that both Roe and Obergefell should be overturned, which seems to jibe. Actually, it is printed jive here, Jive. No editors anymore, with Thomas's latest occurrence. "It should be obvious to anyone who actually reads the Constitution's text, rights do not come from the Constitution," Ellis wrote. "But neither Roe nor Planned Parenthood v. Casey found a right to abortion in the Constitution anyway. These abortion cases didn't even suggest this, but rather the court found that the so-called right to privacy covers some abortions in some circumstances. Since these decisions, the court has sought to balance this right to privacy versus the state's compelling interest in protecting human life. This was established as the undue burden test in Casey. I will point out that there is no right to privacy enumerated in the United States Constitution or in the Bill of Rights." This was judicial finessing to cover up the inherent incongruency of these opinions with the Constitution. Casey and Roe, and later Obergefell, were about finding things that aren't in the Constitution to advance a specific policy agenda, rather than faithfully applying the law, Ellis argued. These cases are about imposing the opinion preferences of a majority of activist judges over the rule of law. This is from Joshua Young at the Post Millennial. In a June 25th tweet, Canadian pollster John Corbett wrote, "Clarence Thomas, just another dumb field N-word, from an account that was almost immediately suspended." Adam B. Coleman, author and the Post-Millennial contributor, posted a screenshot of the hateful and racist remark on Twitter and wrote, "He says N-word with such ease. These are the self-righteous people who see Black people as either an acceptable N-word or a field N-word. Either way, will always be N-words to John V. Corbett because our purpose is to serve a master. Corbett's last significant contribution to politics was in 2021 when he wrote several predictions for the upcoming election in the Toronto Star. Some of his forecasts were, there is no longer a conservative majority of seats in Canada. That dream died with the last progressive conservative, and the Conservatives no longer have a path to victory in this election. Corbett's racist and hateful remark about Justice Thomas illustrates contempt, but also reflects a leftist trend highly visible on Twitter. After the June 24th ruling from the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, an overwhelming number of white progressives have taken to Twitter to post racial invectives about Thomas. Coleman has been retweeting and posting screenshots of many, especially before they're flagged or taken down, and identify these writers as woke white supremacists. The progressive hate for Justice Thomas stems from their perception that an African-American man cannot be a conservative, and then his beliefs cause him to be a betrayer to his race. Progressivism fully embraces intersectional concepts of racial essentialism and defines the world entirely by immutable characteristics as they relate to perception of privilege and hierarchies of power. Thomas's consistent rejection of that ideology invites waves of hate from the left. Authors like Shelby Steele and Thomas Sowell have described how progressive ideology provides a simultaneous relief from guilt for white elites, while reaffirming a sense of infantilization towards minorities that puts them at the top of the food chain. President and CEO of Mainstream Research replied on Twitter saying that Corbett had not worked for the company since 2021 and added, "We condemn his comments and racism and intolerance in all forms. We were not aware he had not updated his bio." And I saw an awful lot of this rage against black man Clarence Thomas on Twitter over the weekend. It's not supposed to, he's not supposed to do things like this. In fact, Clarence Thomas would like to do more than this. He has indicated over the years that he hates affirmative action. And one reason being is that there is an asterisk, if you will, next to his name because of this, because people assume that his achievements aren't really real, that he was given special treatment because he is black. And he would very much like to remove strike down affirmative action in the United States. How do you start with Backy, I suppose? And yes, Jim Obergefell. This is from media. Sarah Rumpf. Justice Thomas should remember the right to interracial marriage is only 6 years older than Roe. Oh, what's the suggestion here? That they're going to punish Clarence Thomas by taking his wife away from him? Jim Obergefell spoke to CNN's Jim Acosta on the 7-year anniversary of the landmark 2015 Supreme Court case Obergefell v. Hodges that legalized same-sex marriage, and discussed the court's recent ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, specifically concerns that the case will lead to other cases being overturned. In the opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito, the court addressed whether various provisions of the U.S. Constitution conferred an implicit constitutional right to an abortion, finding that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. Yes, I've seen many people decrying this decision as anti-democratic. It is, in fact, the opposite of that, because it returns this question to the states and their voters. It should be noted that Thomas's view about due process precedents being overturned was promulgated by Thomas alone. Alito, Justice Neil Gorsuch, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett agreed with Thomas that Roe should be overturned, and Chief Justice John Roberts opposed overturning Roe but agreed with upholding the Mississippi law. Still, Thomas's concurrence was causing growing alarm in the alphabet people community, commented Acosta during Sunday's episode of CNN Newsroom. Acosta noted the date was the anniversary of the Obergefell opinion, playing a video clip of President Barack Obama calling Obergefell to congratulate him on the court victory and asked his guest for his reaction to the Dobbs opinion. "It's been a terrible several days for our nation," Obergefell replied. "Half of our country lost the right to control their own body, and that should terrify everyone in this nation who believes in our ability to make decisions for ourselves." Yes, now do lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Thomas put a target on the back of other rights like contraception and marriage, and that should terrify everyone in this nation, he said. Dobbs was a terrible decision, he continued. We should be moving forward, not backwards. And this court is taking us backwards. This extreme court is taking us backwards. Thomas did not mention Loving v. Virginia, the 1967 case that found laws banning interracial marriage to be unconstitutional. Acosta remarked. Thomas's wife, Jenny Thomas, is white, and has been the focus of multiple reports regarding her communications with people within former President Donald Trump's administration, members of Congress, and people involved in the organization of protests that led to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Oh, is that what it was? Well, at least it's not an insurrection in this story. Obergefell said the right to interracial marriage is only 6 years older than a woman's right to abortion. Our nation has a much longer history of denying interracial marriage. Do we want to go back to the late 18th century, the originalist who's saying we can only interpret the Constitution as of the time it was written? When the Constitution was written, we, the people, did not include blacks, indigenous people. It did not include women. It did not include queer people. That is not a more perfect union, unquote. You want to hear what a bloated 50-year-old superannuated punk rocker has to say? Well, you're going to hear it. This is from Hattie Lindert at the AV Club. Billy Joe Armstrong is done being an American idiot. In the aftermath of the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade and rollback of bodily autonomy, protest isn't good enough for the Green Day frontman. He says he's ready to abandon the U.S. for good. During the London stop on Green Day's Hella Mega Tour, Armstrong took a moment on stage to speak to the grim situation in the U.S. legal system, summing up his frustration with a profanity-laden decree, which I'm not going to repeat. You guys are going to get a lot more of me in the coming days, Armstrong told the crowd at the London Stadium. Armstrong is the latest in a series of prominent musicians who've taken time during performances to denounce the decision to reverse Roe nearly 40 years after it was enshrined into law. I think that's nearly 50 years. While performing at Glastonbury Music Festival, Phoebe Bridgers led the crowd in a raucous F the Supreme Court chant. At the same festival, Olivia Rodrigo brought Lily Allen out on stage to sing a pointed duet of Allen's hit F.U., making it clear the performance was dedicated to 5 specific listeners. Rodrigo said, "I'm devastated and terrified that so many women and so many girls are going to die because of this. I wanted to dedicate this next song to the 5 members of the Supreme Court who have showed us that at the end of the day, they truly don't give a shit about freedom. This song goes out to the Justices Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh. We hate you." Well, thank you for that, Olivia Rodrigo. Alec Baldwin never got into trouble for not leaving the United States. All these other people are constantly threatening to leave the United States, and yet they don't. This fellow, again, this Billy Joe Armstrong fellow, he looks absolutely absurd. He looks like a pudgy 12-year-old who is now a 50-year-old man. Again, from the Post-Millennial, this is Hannah Nightingale. In response to the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade Friday, pro-abortion activists are threatening a sex strike, vowing to remain abstinent until the ruling is changed. According to the New York Post, the hashtag sex strike was trending on Twitter Saturday, with pro-abortion women stating that they withheld from participating in sex because they cannot take the risk of an unintended pregnancy. Women of America, take the pledge. One post circulated on Twitter read, because Scott has overturned Roe v. Wade, we cannot take the risk of an unintended pregnancy. Therefore, we will not have sex with any man, including our husbands, unless we're trying to become pregnant. But what if they become pregnant and then decide that it is an unintended pregnancy? What if they change their mind? If you've seen pictures of the women holding up these signs, it's clear that they are incels. They are angry incels. Nobody wants to have sex with them. Speaking with the New York Post, one woman said that if men aren't getting vasectomies, they don't deserve to have sex with her. If you're a man and won't get a vasectomy, even though it's reversible, and you're not out in the streets fighting for my rights, you do not deserve to have sex with me, said Brianna Campbell, a 24-year-old EMT. Another woman, a 22-year-old event coordinator, Carolyn Healy, told the Post that it's absolutely valid for women to uphold the holy grail that men seem to think is most important. I don't know what that means. Why shouldn't we withhold it if we're always worried that they're not going to put a condom on, that they're going to take one off after we ask them to? If we can't safely go out and have sex and know that we will have a choice after that, then why should we expect it to? Why indeed? Why indeed? Another tweet from actor and activist Alyssa Milano, which was originally posted in 2019, recirculated Saturday, with Milano stating, our reproductive rights are being erased until women have legal control of our own bodies. We just cannot risk pregnancy. Don't risk pregnancy then. Don't have sex. I applaud. I applaud. Yes, a lot of swearing. A lot of swearing. Oh, yes, this is from BLM. Who says, don't have sex with your husbands. That's not the word that she uses. Don't have sex with your boyfriends. Don't have sex with that random from that one app. Women posting their L's. Always amusing. Always amusing. Gypsy Soul Nancy tweets, nicely done, ladies. Abstaining from sex prevents an unwanted pregnancy and abortion. Women, if you were having a tough time with the sex strike and abstinence, just picture Mitch McConnell naked. That would do it. For me, pictures of Lizzo, or even mention of the person Lizzo. That's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. Mostly peaceful memes tweeted what? Wait, so abstinence works? Apparently it does. Apparently it does. They've gone a full 180 on abstinence. Paul Joseph Watson comments, your terms are acceptable. And this is from Steve Watson at Summit News. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court actually brings the U.S. into line with much of the rest of the world on abortion laws. Many Democrats are adamant that America should not have any limits on abortion. New York City Mayor Eric Adams said no, he does not believe in any limitation on abortions, and he went public to boast of the abortion that his girlfriend had had when they were 15 years old. He wouldn't have become mayor if that abortion hadn't taken place. I don't know, that's quite a moral dilemma there, aren't they? How long before Eric Adams is mayor of New York City, before New Yorkers start longing for Bill de Blasio to return? What does Stacey Abrams have to say about this? How about the third trimester? She said, well, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on in the third trimester? I think we do. So let the woman make the decision. Keep the government out of it. Abrams said that should be a choice made between a doctor and a woman. I'm rather surprised she didn't sneak God in there, because so many of these people do. That they only are interested in God and religion when we're talking about drag queens, homosexuality, transsexuals, and killing your baby. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Oscar Toe, who says, listening to Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony for KMG pregame, fifth movement titled Shepherd's Song, cheerful and thankful feelings after the storm. Curious you mentioned that, because Shaw Cable, you sign on to just the minimum package, you get something like about 60 or 70 digital music channels. And I often listen to the channel 425, the Symphony channel. I believe they called it Great Masters. And I went to put it on today, and it's gone, replaced with country classics. There are 3 other classical stations there. There's popular, and there's baroque, and there's chamber, but the orchestral channel has vanished, which was unfortunate. Hello to Anrun, who says, I'm pretty conventional on Beethoven symphonies. 3, 5, and 9 are my favorites. So I'd have to say that number 7 would be my favorite. Wagner certainly liked it. What did he call it? He called it the essence of the dance, something like that. Hello to Palpicasso 88, Head McNeck. Kevin really surprised me with the Photoshop Clarence Thomas picture he retweeted the other day. You mean Corn Pop's Revenge? Hello to John S. William Hicks. Oscar Toe says, there is a glimmer of truth in DR3 and it's effective with older people. I don't know how many times I've heard them use DR3 in conversation. Head McNeck says, if Dinesh D'Souza were a droid, he would be DR3PO. Good one. I like that. 7 Costanza says, Stevie Nicks' baby with Don Henley aborted, and then she wrote a song about it called Sarah. And when I first learned the origin of this hit song, I was gobsmacked, as they say in England. You did what? You did what? Boy, I guess really sticking it to Don there. Oscar Toe says, often the dissonant right are like hipsters that beatniks and scoff at things that are somewhat effective, like DR3. And run mixed up marriages, as an old handyman I used to know called them. I don't know. Clarence and his wife seem happy enough. The hipsters of the dissonant right also mocked Let's Go Brandon not too long ago until they braced it more recently. Clarence has been brooding for decades, waiting for this moment, says Kevin Costanza. Hello to Professor Paul Kakrapajavaitia. And he says, Guten Abend, Herr Grace. Anwan, thank you for your kind words about the ensemble. Happily never liked Green Day, says Oscar Toe. You know, you can't. I bought their first record. It wasn't their first record. It was their first major label record, Dookie, I think it was called. You can't keep that stuff up. I mean, that was almost 30 years ago. You're still frothing at the mouth, angry after all this time. No, it's not possible. It's fake. LMAO Sting is like God in comparison, says Oscar Toe. Recently watched Confirmation, says William Hicks. Very unfair to Clarence and Ginny Thomas. They omitted key moments. Big surprise. I watched those hearings and will never forget. It was appalling. Hello to Duvid. Has Sting weighed in on the ruling yet, says Halper. Lily Allen is execrable, says Palpicasso 88. Lily Allen is what? Show business royalty in Britain. She likes to pose as working class or something like that, which is absolutely absurd. She is the daughter of Keith Allen, comedian, actor, and film producer named Alison Owen. Yes, Allen attended 13 schools, including Prince Charles's junior alma mater, the independent Hill House School, Millfield, Bedales, ooh, very Tony, and was expelled from several of them for drinking and smoking. Yes, yes, just an ordinary Brit, and she's not an ordinary Brit. I don't have anything against her upbringing. I do not hold it against her in the slightest. This is interesting. A TikTok video from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Not every Democrat is pro-choice. We really need to reassess if it's appropriate for them to continue to serve. Ooh, that's the litmus test, is whether AOC approves This woman has become a little too big for her boots. Actually, she's been too big for her boots for a very long time. This is from Off the Press. Kurt Michelson tweets, "For years we were told that abortion is only 3% of what Planned Parenthood does. So why are they closing locations all over the country?" They make a lot of money performing abortions, and they get money from government too. Herb Scribner at Axios writes, "Abortion clinics across the country close after Roe v. Wade ruling." The big picture. There are at least 13 states with trigger laws that will immediately outlaw abortion, which means that more than a quarter of nearly 800 clinics will shut down, according to CBS News. This will especially limit access to abortion clinics in the South and Midwest, since at least 32 abortion providers across Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana, and Texas will be prohibited from offering the procedure. It's been, I remember reading an article, this was 25 years ago. It's quite influential, that abortion clinics have been shuttering in the United States for some time because doctors, most of them, do not like performing abortions. And there was one abortionist who related a conversation with a physician friend of his where they were going to get together on Saturday afternoon after work, I don't know, for drinks or something like that, or for a meal. And so the non-abortionist called the abortionist at his clinic, and the abortionist said that he was going to be a little late. And the non-abortionist said, he laughed and said, "Still killing babies this late in the day?" The abortionist was deeply, deeply hurt. And of course, which has led to attempts to force all doctors to perform abortions with no exemption for, conscience rights. And let's go back to the chat here. Telling people in another country you left because abortion was illegal, LOL, says Seven Costanza. Yeah, don't go to Spain. It's real hard to get an abortion there, almost impossible. Many such countries. Clarence has come, a truthful, chasing, honest Clarence that destroyed abortion with his pen in Washington. My apologies, Shakespeare. That's from Anne Run. Lily is dating the disgrace of an actor, David Harbour, now. They really deserve each other, says Oscar Toe. That woman has just been through the mill, And I don't... Is it not possible for these people to exercise some discretion? That every peccadillo of your love life or your drug life or whatever, or of your nervous breakdowns or of your imaginary Lyme disease, and exhaustion, which of course has been replaced with Lyme disease and other such things. Is it necessary for, the Daily Mail to report about all this? Couldn't you just keep it to yourself? Palpicasso 88 says, anytime there's major news, my first thought is, what does the annoying girl from Who's the Boss think? Oh, and Charmed, and reminds us. Dionisa says, celebrity phony rage is so provoking. I would love to exchange places with them so they could feel what real persecution feels like. Hello to Yakoroy Pala, our Finnish friend. Even people who aren't troubled by early term abortion because it doesn't look like baby find late term disgusting. Baby killing is just too much for innate human reactions. Ruslan Akhbatov says, what is DR3? Democrats are the real racists. Are real racists. 3. Warren Kinsella, the Canadian Johnny Rotten, says Palpicasso 88. Yes. Has he got to the point where he's claimed that he invented punk music yet? William Hicks says, so the feminists are pretty miserable after the Scottish lesson. In reality, that's got to be tough. Okay, British America says, KMG, do not read my above comment. You make that kind of irresistible, As the BLM and Twitter Black Square show, these celebrities will forget about this in a few weeks. This is just a chance to show their narcissism. Tony Danza and I share a birthday, confesses Palcasso 88. This decision might lead some people to rethink the way they live their lives. I don't have to worry about contraception, and I can have sex with, someone I just met, and I can have sex with someone I just met after, we both got high and smoked up and had, 10 drinks or whatever. I think this could lead to, but there's the abortion. There's a right to abortion there, so I don't have to worry about it. And I think it could lead to some women reconsidering. Do I have to live this way? Is this a good way to live? And who else do we have? Okay. Here we go. Hello to Pete Bauman. I suppose, though, I'd like to know the percentage of black sports ballers with white wives' girlfriends, says Ann Run. It was pointed out to me by Anon Wyatt, who used to appear with me from time to time on Luke Ford's show, that these sports ballers and celebrities, actors, singers, whatever, black ones, the white women that they favor tend to have the physiognomy of black women. That is to say, they are thick. Is that spelled THICC, I believe? Okay. Abortion will become a constitutional right through Congress, says Seven Costanza. I don't think that's going to happen. They don't have the votes. Hello to Rustin Shackelford, who says, Cotto is really upset. I understand his point about the acceleration of American demographics and its consequences, but I cannot take his side. Yeah. It just, these people come out of the woodwork, and yes, they say they support abortion. Why? Because it kills a lot of black babies. No, sorry. That's just a line too far for me. I maintain my controversial, not to say lonely, stance against mass murder. And Tony Danza actually had a sizable role in a production of The Iceman Cometh on Broadway, says Ann Run. That sounds like an SCTV skit. I mean, it really does. Pogs, says Chocokin 666. That's another name, I suppose. And, who's claiming credit? David A. French. You know him. The Jagmeister, the fellow who claims that drag queen story time is one of the blessings of American liberty. This is from Twitchy Sam Janney. Julie Kelly brought up an interesting point right after Scottus overturned Roe, and that was how never-Trumpers were going to act like they in some way made it happen, that they would cheer and pat themselves on the backs, and she was right. Forget they fought against the president who actually appointed the Scottish justices who actually made it happen. They were wrong. Remember when they mocked us all for championing his Gorsuch pick? Yeah. For example, David French is super excited about Roe being overturned, as he should be, but let's be honest. If he and other never-Trumpers had their way, this would not be happening. Someone called Bonchi on Twitter said, this day only happened because you didn't get your way. I'm glad that you are happy, and we should all join in celebrating, but some admission that you were wrong would be nice before immediately trying to present yourself as a leader in the struggle. Indeed, didn't a lot of these never-Trumpers take the side of Dr. Blasey Ford against Brett Kavanaugh? I'm sure some of them did. We're going to be hearing from one of them soon enough. Julie Kelly tweeted, decades in the making, only you would attempt to take credit for something that never would have happened without President Trump, and you're so graceless you can't bring yourself to credit him. Molly Hemingway tweeted, so thankful your anti-Trumpist obsession and damaged ego failed to keep the country from this moment. If you had gotten your way, this day would have never happened. You should repent for your continual slanders against those who had far more courage and wisdom. And so I guess you're all You're all eager to hear. You're all on pins and needles. What does size E cup have to say about this? She, of course, is the conservative at CNN. Again, from the same source, size E cup is so pro-life, she supports Roe. Alrighty then, she went so far as to write about it for Oprah Daily. How very conservative and libertarian of her. Okay, so we read this piece so you wouldn't have to. You're welcome. What a sad, boring pile of, oh, woe is me. And also she could remind everyone how conservative she really is, that most people support Roe and that the modern right is evil. So basically what she's been babbling about for the last 5 years now. From her Oprah Daily piece, my version of pro-life found the procedure to be lamentable and sad, from the position that the deaths of tens of millions of unborn babies couldn't possibly be a society's best answer to unwanted pregnancies. I wished for better alternatives and bemoaned where the left seemed to promote and celebrate abortion as an expression of women's liberation. But I didn't hate or judge women who'd made that agonizing decision. I'd known women who'd gotten abortions. To a person, they were excruciatingly tough decisions, and at least one later expressed a deep regret. Importantly, my version of pro-life accepted fully that Roe v. Wade was settled law. It indeed appeared to be, as the Supreme Court justices over many administrations upheld it. Yeah, she's lying here. Oh, every woman goes through agony. And I don't know, is what leafing through the Bible and religious texts and praying, and no. It has become a form of contraception. Again, I had some random hookup. No contraception was used. No morning after pill was consumed. Oh dear, I'm pregnant, but I can just get rid of it. That simple. Bonchi, quoted earlier, said to SE Cup, this is what selling your soul looks like. Mark Hemingway commented, LOL, come on. Really? Aldous Huxley's ghost responded, the federal ban on abortion is as much a ban on abortion as overturning the national 55-mile-an-hour speed limit was a ban on speed limits. You have, however, demonstrated quite nicely that politics gets this debate all wrong. Someone called Oy Vey commented on Twitter, funny, but I'm the opposite. I'm pro-choice to a point, but I know that Roe is bad law. The Constitution is silent, and there are no secret penumbras planted by our founders. And so this is a very long piece at Oprah Daily, which is a publication I didn't know existed until a couple of days ago. For as long as I can remember, she begins, I've considered myself pro-life. I'm a center-right conservative. 25 years ago, I was drawn to the conservative movement in a Republican Party that seemed empowering, even and especially for women. That is very poorly written. Economic policies that removed barriers to entrepreneurship, cut government waste and regulations, promoted democracy and its freedoms all around the world, lowered the debt and deficit, all seem to be right and good for everyone. A rising tide lifts all boats, as the saying goes. Free enterprise. What economic policies that lowered the debt and deficit? I'd like to ask size E Cup, name me one conservative government anywhere, any time, that has lowered debt and deficit. Where are they? Where are they? Promoted democracy and its freedoms around the world. Oh, I get it. We bomb them because we love them. Removed barriers to entrepreneurship. Well, banking regulations were removed, in the 1990s. How did that work out for America? Cut government waste and regulations. Conservatives have been saying this for decades, and what happens when they get in power? They've been in power often enough to cut so much of this waste and regulations. She continues, I wasn't really animated by the social issues. Yeah, because social issues are unimportant compared to worship of Moloch. And there were parts of the platform I didn't agree with. I'd always supported gay rights and found that to be conservative too. Yeah. The unconventional conservatism of chemsex. I wonder if she read about monkeypox and the outbreak. It followed a 10-day long homosexual orgy on Gran Canaria, part of the Canary Islands, part of Spain. Is that conservative too? 10-day long orgies? But I guess, the state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation, because what goes on in the bedrooms of the nation is of no concern and of no consequences to anyone. If we want the government out of our private lives and to promote the institution of marriage, this only made sense to me. Promote the institution of marriage. Gay marriage is a sad burlesque, because homosexual men are not monogamous. Come on. The University of Chicago survey, the most definitive, showed that the average number of sexual partners for homosexual American men in their lives is 125. Number of partners over a lifetime, average for heterosexual men, 6. I opposed capital punishment. Yes, of course she does. And I was pro-life, but in a way I knew it was very different from many in my party. I wasn't religious. In fact, I was a devout atheist. Because what does she mean, devout atheist? This woman is just, I'm not going to talk about this woman anymore. She's too stupid. Just too stupid. Devout atheist. Oh, yes. I just came across this by accident. This was from Glamour from 6 years ago. An opinion piece by size E Cup. Conservative columnist size E Cup. It's a shame that the whip smart, experienced, tough as nails Carly Fiorina got sidelined by the oxygen-eating juggernaut Donald Trump. I consider Carly Fiorina's campaign a rousing success. Yes, 1% was it in the Iowa caucus and 4% in the New Hampshire primary. We've pretty much all forgotten Carly Fiorina, except for people associated with Hewlett-Packard, a once great American company that she drove into the ground. Yeah, let's get into low-margin, cheap computers. Let's buy Compaq. That is just one of the dumbest ideas any CEO has ever come up with, but look at that golden parachute she got. I remember talking about Carly Fiorina back in 2016. As far as I can tell, and I don't believe she's ever denied it, her first name is actually Carlton. Seriously. And that, I don't know, that can't be good. That can't be good. No, it's just a rousing success. Do you know what counts as a rousing success? Winning counts as a rousing success. Oh, moral victory. There are no moral victories in politics. There's just victory and defeat. Oh, yes. What about Canada? What about Canada? What about Canada? Because, again, I'll just have to say that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who admitted in public that he can't add 13 and 14 to make 27, I'm not making this up, you could look it up. I get the impression that he doesn't really understand that Canada and the United States are separate countries. This is a story from Bloomberg. With Roe overturned, Canada could become an abortion destination. Or you could just go to New York State, say, which is, further south than Canada. The Bloor West Village Women's Clinic in Toronto has had very few American patients, despite advertising its abortion services internationally. That may be about to change. The challenge will be affording it. Those needing an abortion still need to be able to pay the cost of travel, and for the procedure itself, travel to Canada also requires a passport and a vaccine card. Trudeau lamented that the Supreme Court's decision was a devastating setback to the battle for right. Can't anyone write English anymore? Okay, so this is curious, actually. because it says that Carolyn Egan, a spokesperson for the Ontario Coalition for Abortion Clinics, said the cost of the procedure at a Canadian clinic is about $500 Canadian, but that doesn't include any travel costs a woman from the U.S. might incur. In Michigan, an abortion costs $600 to $900, according to the Women's Center of Michigan. Again, no editors. Abortion is free of charge for Canadians. And there's a curious story behind that. But back in the 1990s, Premier Ralph Klein of Alberta announced, to the absolute horror of much fainting and wailing, that the government of Alberta was no longer going to pay for elective abortions. That is to say, only abortions with a strict medical reason would count. And there are very few abortions done for medical reasons, a tiny amount of abortions done for medical reasons. Psychological, whatever, doesn't count. I interviewed at the time the chief medical ethicist for the government of British Columbia, Ika Kluge, who was strongly pro-abortion and said that this psychological damage, he says, it's nonsense. It's just nonsense. So then the government of Canada, the Ministry of Health, said all provinces pay for the majority of medical costs in Canada. The vast majority, actually. The government of Canada ruled that abortion was a guaranteed procedure under medical service plans. The only one, the only procedure that the provinces must pay for. In my province, eye examinations are not covered under healthcare. You would think that eye examinations would be pretty important, not as important as abortion, however. So, is gay marriage under threat? Well, we'll see. This is from the Daily Beast, Roger Sollenberger. Blake Masters' views on gay marriage. It's funny, when I saw that, I thought, Blake Masters, do I know that name? And I thought, he's a NASCAR driver, isn't he? Or he's a country singer. Doesn't that sound like the perfect name for a NASCAR driver or country singer? Blake Masters. His views on gay marriage may surprise his political master, Peter Thiel. Republican senatorial candidate Blake Masters enjoys the financial and political support of his longtime friend, mentor, and billionaire business partner, Peter Thiel, who is gay. But Masters, who attended Thiel's wedding, also apparently believes Thiel's marriage should be illegal. It's not just Disney, follow your heart, Masters said earlier this year, has a point. That point, he said, is making children. And since there's no procreation within same-sex marriages, Masters reasoned those unions don't have a point and therefore should be banned. I don't know. Is Peter Thiel going to be very upset about this? I haven't heard much from him lately. There was the Pride Parade in Victoria on Sunday, and I stayed well away from that section of town. This is from Jonathan Montpetit at CBC. Libraries in Canada hit by wave of hate threats as right-wing groups protest all-age drag events. Online campaign backed by groups associated with Freedom Convoy, fueled by anti-alphabet people rhetoric. And so we have a picture of a drag story event at the St. John Free Public Library featuring Sean Kraft performing as Diamande. This is a man who appears to weigh about 275, 300 pounds, more, maybe. Family-friendly drag events across Canada. Oh, yes. This is not an opinion piece. This is supposedly a news story. Family-friendly drag events. Many hosted by municipal libraries have been targeted by a deluge of hateful comments and threats during Pride Month, prompting multiple police investigations and renewed concerns about the safety of the alphabet people community. More than half a dozen libraries and drag performers from St. John to Victoria reported being inundated online and over the phone by homophobic slurs and in some cases threats of violence. You want to detail some of them? Okay, what's a threat of violence? Is showing up and yelling at them? Is that considered a threat of violence? Whenever these stories, for instance, hateful rhetoric, dangerous rhetoric, threats, death threats, Can you paraphrase them for me? Okay. It's not necessary, to print the verbatim text. Could you just paraphrase them for me? And if you don't, I tend to come to the conclusion that I don't believe these claims. Drag story hour events are popular at many libraries in the country and usually feature a performer in drag reading children's books about inclusion. They are often held in collaboration with local alphabet people associations and have caused only minor controversy in the past. But amid a surge in anti-alphabet people rhetoric and policies in the U.S. and a conservative movement in Canada increasingly influenced by right-wing politics south of the border, the all-ages drag events have turned into flashpoints of anger. So there's a picture of two drag performers here. One is called Jessica with a K, of course, Rabid, left, and Farah Nuff were among 24 supporters who turned up to protect an all-ages drag storytelling in Calgary last week. Well, I'm looking at Jessica Rabbit, and Jessica Rabbit is very clearly a biological woman. So how do you get to be a drag performer if you're a biological woman? Of course, the lesbian mayor of Victoria, Lisa Helps, dressed up as a man last week in front of City Hall. Matt Taibbi is an interesting fellow. For years and years, I thought that he was a shit lib. He seems to have evolved, as they say. This is at the Daily Wire, Amanda Prestigiacomo. Old school liberal investigative journalist Matt Taibbi told Ben Shapiro on this week's episode of Sunday Special that he lost friends for merely reviewing Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire's groundbreaking documentary, What is a Woman? Taibbi was a star writer at Rolling Stone magazine and beloved by the elite liberal media, but as the left radicalized and Taibbi stayed the same, the journalist found himself in a new space, like, for example, sitting down for a lengthy conversation with one of the most prominent conservative figures in American politics and seeing a lot of agreement. Taibbi told Shapiro the response was unbelievable just for reviewing the movie. Forget about what I said about it. I lost friends over that. There were people who I've known for decades who basically said I'm a transphobe and I'm out of their loop. With the trans issue, there would be some people who would talk to me, and then there would be some people who were furious that you even called, would refuse to have any kind of discussion, would call you a transphobe for even asking certain kinds of questions, and this is before you even have a point of view on the subject. I thought that was odd. Taibbi noted that this was a rehash of what he witnessed as a journalist in 2016 when reporting on former President Donald Trump. He recalled including a quote from a pro-union lifelong Democrat who says he voted Republican for the first time for Trump because he felt lied to about the North American Free Trade Agreement. The pushback from the leftist media community told Taibbi that he wasn't allowed to report or say true things if they went against the greater narrative. Well, he's on Substack now, so he is free. Well, free to write whatever he wants. Now, this was useful of Peter Hitchens to put this up on his blog at the Mail on Sunday, sorry. This is from 2007. I thought the overturning of the Roe v. Wade judgment might be a good time to republish this posting from October 2007 on the abortion controversy. Hardly anyone says or thinks that abortion is a good thing in itself. Even its supporters accept that this is a nasty procedure. That's changed a fair amount. They are boasting. They're boasting to the heavens, a great many women these days. Hillary Clinton, for instance, has frequently declared that it should be safe, legal, and, pause for effect, rare. But that is the problem. If it is safe and legal, it is likely to become more common. So it has, with the figures in Britain creeping ever closer to the 200,000 a year mark, despite, or in my view, because of sex education, readily available contraceptives, and the increasing ease of obtaining the morning after pill. I agree with Hitchens about this. It seems to me there's a great many people, both women and men, who believe that contraception is in the air. I don't need to use contraception personally because everyone else is using it. It's such a strange phenomenon. One of the problems of this argument is that there is no reliable information about the true state of affairs before abortion was legalized in Britain 40 years ago. Whose word would you trust on this matter? Pro-abortion propagandists talk of tens of thousands of bloody backstreet abortions, and in the 1960s estimated these at anywhere up to 250,000 a year. How did they know? Well, it's obvious that this number was made up. If there were 250,000 bloody backstreet abortions every year in Britain, there would have been many thousands of deaths thereby. Were backstreet abortions widespread before 1967? At the time that the bill was going through Parliament, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists said of such claims, quote, "These are without any secure factual foundation of which we are aware. The incidence of criminal abortion varies widely from city to city. In the experience of many gynecologists working outside large cosmopolitan cities, the occurrence is relatively uncommon, and when it does happen, the abortion is more often induced by the woman herself than by some other person." The report said that there were on average 50 fatal abortion attempts each year in England and Wales. Of these, 30 followed criminal acts. If, quote, "if there are 100,000 criminal, including self-induced abortions being performed annually, this means that they are attended by a mortality rate of only 0.3 per 1,000. The risks of criminal abortion are established to be high, so the known number of deaths suggests that the total number of such cases must be considerably less than that alleged," unquote. Hitchens comments, "The only alternative explanation for the lack of fatality, said the doctors, was that criminal abortions in backstreets must be safer than legal ones in hospitals. Not very likely, is it? No, it is not very likely. And there are very few women then and now who are willing to do a certain thing I won't say because it's too disgusting, because it's obviously a crazy and so very dangerous. A great many women who become pregnant, have an unwanted pregnancy, and the absence of alternatives will say, well, I guess I have to just have the baby, Lisa Van Dusen at Canadian Politics and Public Policies Journal Policy, which is a quasi-governmental outlet. I like to go to this woman from time to time because I'm distantly related to her through my grandmother, and because she is one of the worst writers in Canada. Within the dystopian melodrama of the Supreme Court of the United States v. America, in the specific case of Friday's previously telegraphed ruling on abortion rights, there has been a secondary narrative emerging. The hashtag for that knock-on narrative is elections matter, meaning that if American voters had elected Hillary Clinton in 2016, this would never have happened. Yeah. And the reality of how Donald Trump packed the court, no, he did not pack the court. That is not what packing the court means, you dimwit. Pack the court was in the event not so much automatic as autocratic. Ooh. It required a deployment of tactical duplicitousness on the part of certain Scottish nominees during the Roe v. Wade reassurance section of their testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee that, like so many other assaults on democracy in the post-Obama era, yes, returning things to the states and their voters is an attack on democracy. Look, the senators that ask these leading questions of nominees for the Supreme Court know what they're doing. Oh, I want you to adjudicate a case that challenges Roe v. Wade. Well, a nominee for the Supreme Court cannot do that because, what are the circumstances of the case? What are the arguments that are going to be made? It's a stupid question. They shouldn't ask it. You cannot ask a nominee for the Supreme Court to prejudge any case put before the Supreme Court. It was unprecedented because nobody had ever possessed the requisite combination of power, gall, and treachery to stage quite such an assault before. In this age of ends justify the means politics, ends justify the means politics. We've never had that in history before. It was only Orange Man Bad who brought that about, whereby the old school tactics of the most Machiavellian political machines have been exponentially amplified by technology, strategic corruption, and propaganda, comma. The Supreme Court of the United States hasn't just been packed untrue, comma. It's been weaponized against its fellow citizens. And that sentence finally ended. On election laws, on gun laws, and on the rolling back of human rights, this transformation, both in substance and in reputational degradation value. Hey, username available, reputational degradation value, now situates it in a motley cast of corruption captured. Okay. Now situates it in a motley cast of corruption captured anti-democracy actors. Again, no editors anymore. Still, to blame what is happening to America as a high-value target in the global war on democracy on the voters who elected Donald Trump in 2016 opens the door to 100 cascading counterfactuals. Is someone putting pills in her jelly beans? Again? Yes. Let's see. How does she conclude? Roe v. Wade was subsequently overturned based on the flagrant obliteration of longstanding norms of American democracy. Again, you don't know what democracy is, including the integrity of the Scottish nomination process and the overturning of the principle articulated by Alexander Hamilton. He was half black, you know. Actually, he wasn't black at all, but never mind. For all you strict constructionists out there, ooh, sick burn. That it be the court's role to, quote, guard the Constitution and the rights of individuals from the effects of those ill humors which the arts of designing men or the influence of particular conjectures sometimes disseminate among the people themselves, unquote. I don't know what she thinks that this quotation from Alexander Hamilton proves. It could very well prove, and it seems to be very well proved, the contention made by Justice Thomas. And in a pre-midterm context already rife with propaganda designed to rationalize a Republican victory in November. What do you mean, to rationalize a Republican victory in November? Presumably, if they get more votes than the Democrats, they'll win. They would act as a force multiplier. Oh, boo-grown hiss. For the sort of anti-democracy, there we go again, warfare now emanating regularly from the U.S. Supreme Court and elsewhere, reminding voters that elections matter can't be a bad thing. But it may be more appropriate as a rallying cry for the 2020 midterms than as finger-pointing for 2016. You mean finger-pointing at 2016? Policy Magazine Associate Editor Lisa Van Dusen was a senior writer at Maclean's, Washington columnist for the Ottawa Citizen and Sun Media, international writer for Peter Jennings at ABC News, and an editor at AP National in New York and UPI in Washington. Journalists, don't you just love them? And before I go back to the chat, which I will do shortly, let's look at Jim Kunstler's column today, which is called The Time of Our Time. We have not been so ripe for regime change since 1776. A ruling party of chaos is doing absolutely everything to disorder our lives, and there really is no generous interpretation for its motives. Let's face it, most people will not read Justice Alito's carefully crafted arguments about what the Constitution says or doesn't say about abortion or the meaning of ordered liberty through our history. We do not live in history. We live in the time of our time. And until just recently, this has been a time that discarded former modes of conduct between men, women, and children as inconvenient to the presumably greater project of self-actualization. To be all that you can be is a stirring notion, and it seemed to work nicely within the colossal techno-industrial armature of the past century, with all its inducements to thrive personally, at least for the comfortable elites who pulled the levers of that system, though not so much for those below caught in the gears, who produced children despite all the novel means for avoiding it. For the fortunate, motherhood became just another no box to check off, while fatherhood merged into the odious mists of obsolete patriarchy. History is made up of things that seem like good ideas at the time. The hard part now is moving out of a familiar time into the undiscovered country of a new time. The support system for all that is going, gone, and in the ensuing flux, all that rousing self-actualization starts to look more like Thomas Hobbes's war of all against all, a savage and pre-human state of nature, As this occurs, all human beings have to fall back on our modes of conduct that include a moral and ethical dimension, which is to say what is right and what is wrong, not just what is allowed at a given moment. Which is also to say, maybe the time of smashing boundaries is over. As that scaffold of techno-industrial comfort and safety disintegrates, and all the dazzling promises of becoming transhuman dissolve, sorry, Klaus Schwab, we will likely have to settle for being human again, and in the best way, not the worst way. That includes a certain reverence for our nature and for each other that suggests not killing children. These days, this place on the planet that used to be a nation groans under a tribulation of bad ideas, bad choices, bad conduct, bad management, and bad faith. We have not been so ripe for regime change since 1776. The party of chaos, everything it touches breaks, wilts, withers, splinters, rots, poisons, and infects the body politic, driving it deeper into derangement. It doesn't even pretend to make sense because that would require making distinctions between what is true and what's not true. We follow the science into pure evil. What awaits is the abandoned scaffold of the family and the community, as opposed to the brute hierarchies of mere lonely, forsaken persons under Leviathan Thate and the behemoth corporation, which have produced mainly new kinds of cruelties, such as the vaccine mandates, the no-knock FBI visitations, the surveillance cameras, the robotic phone trees with their interminable holes, the obtuse insults of the HR departments, the drag queens twerking in your children's faces, and much more. You might not know it from the news. What is the news now anyway, except mercenary shuck and jive? But these giant governments and corporations are thrashing in their death throes. Get out of their way if you possibly can. Form the bonds you can with people and cherish them. For many, they will be all you'll have for a while. Out of all of that suffering will eventually come a new respect for human life and reconstructed relations between men and women, with all the abstruse ambiguities, pretensions, and nebulosities about sex put aside for some future age of decadence. It won't require further agonizing reappraisals by any high courts to figure it out. Children are the consequence of sex. Children are required to carry on the human project. And as promised just a moment ago, let's go back to the chat before I talk about poetry. Ruslan Akhmatov says current system prevents men from becoming all they can be. Big sister government has to go. Did you see the pictures of the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, and Minister of Finance, and Carolyn Bennett, the Minister of Health, dancing at the Gay Pride Parade in Toronto with Chrystia Freeland? Well, she was really boogieing down a storm, getting jiggy with it, as she would probably say. Again, dressed in a shift dress about 2 sizes too small for her, so that once again she looked like a sausage about to burst its casing. And Carolyn Bennett was, I thought, is this a man in drag? This is a very old man in drag. Rainbow slippers and rainbow this and that. It's just, these are the adults in the room, don't you know? Courts aren't supposed to be democratic, says Yo Mama. Indeed. He was a cute white boy. Ironically, dad is a volunteer firefighter, so he probably gets calls to break car windows with children animals, so Picasso 88. Huh, okay. I don't know what that is in reference to. Single moms don't have much sexual market value, says Seven Costanza. I remember a Neil Young chorus from the 1970s. Welfare mothers make better lovers. I believe the song was called Welfare Mothers. British American says, oh no, not Lisa Van Dusen again. Right, KMG. She is a god-awful writer. Her problem specifically is overwriting. I have to go. Bye, everyone. Yes. The Van Dusens were at one point a big political family in Canada, and they are an offshoot of the Grace family, or you could say that the Graces are an offshoot from the Van Dusen family. Oh, okay. No, I don't want to talk about that. A woman in Bancroft, Ontario, left her 2-year-old child in her hot car all day while she taught high school. The child died. High school teacher. Okay. All right. Drag queen tornado warnings are inevitable, says Hauper. Hello. Oscar Toe suggests that Paul Gottfried is heavily against abortion. Okay. Danza is the new Sting, says Anran. Danza taught Daniel Day-Lewis, says Oscar Toe. That's a good one. It's a good one. They remade Who's the Boss? David the Gnome. I don't know. I don't know. I just like the bit on Community about who's the boss, because we had I'm trying to remember the name of the actor. He was in Silicon Valley as well, and he was giving a college course on who really was the boss, right? Too difficult to say, apparently. And then Abed showed up to demonstrate that Tony Danza was by all metrics that he was in fact the boss. I'm trying to think. Do we have lunkhead figures like Tony Danza as sitcom stars now? Do we? I don't keep up with sitcoms perhaps the way that I used to. Stephen Tobolowsky is the name of the actor, who he is just outstanding, both in comedy and drama. He always brings it. Always. Anyone else new? A very sensible take from Vox Day, but I'll still never be able to take him seriously after what he seemed to actually think would happen on January 6th, 2021. Is Cotto still stuck in the 1980s? I mean, literally so, as British American. Blake Masters is like a comic book hero, as normal guy like Clark Kent, says Oscar Toe. Tony Danza was fine in an HBO remake of 12 Angry Men, directed by William Friedkin. Now you must be trolling me. 12 Angry Men, Tony Danza. I'm trying to remember the name of the would this be the Lee J. Cobb role of the kind of redneck, kind of racist guy on the jury? Very sweaty. Okay. And now I want to talk about poetry, or the lack thereof. This is Tom Pyman from the Daily Mail. British Education Secretary Nadhim Zawahi today slammed a GCSE exam board's cultural vandalism after it ditched giants of English literature like Wilfred Owen, Philip Larkin, and John Keats in favor of a series of Black, disabled, and alphabet people poets. OCR has also removed works by Thomas Hardy, Seamus Heaney, and Siegfried Sassoon in a drive to introduce exciting and diverse voices to its syllabus. The exam board has retained 30 poems from last year's set of 45, replacing 15. The new entries include 14 by poets of color, with OCR adding that the list also includes disabled and alphabet people voices. Siegfried Sassoon was a homosexual for a great part of his life, and Wilfred Owen was almost certainly a homosexual. Is it possible that the people who make up these exams, they know so little about Owen and Sassoon that they wouldn't know this? So Howie said he will be discussing the decision with OCR as he took to Twitter to condemn the decision, which will see the updated selection taught from September. The exam board said the poems to be replaced will have largely already been studied and assessed. So Howie said Larkin and Owen are two of our finest poets. Removing their work from the curriculum is cultural vandalism. Their work must be passed on to future generations, as it was to me. I will be speaking to the exam board to make this clear. Downing Street said the Prime Minister would back Zahawi raising the issue with the board. Asked if the education secretary would have Boris Johnson's support, and number 10 spokesman said yes. We want to see children continuing to receive a broad range of education in these areas. And yes, apparently one of these new poets is deaf. And the relevance of that being the Stratford-on-Avon MP used his own experience to advocate for the retention of older, better-known British poets. Quote, as a teenager, improving my grasp of the English language, Larkin's poems taught me so much about my new home. We must not deny future students the chance to make a similarly powerful connection with a great British author or miss out on the joy of knowing his work, unquote. Some of the best-known First World War works, including Owen's Anthem for Doomed Youth, have been scrapped from the conflict section of the anthology, replaced by new pieces, including We Lived Happily During the War by Ilya Kaminsky, Colonization in Reverse by Louise Bennett Coverley, and 13 by Caleb Femi. Of the changes, it said, our anthology for GCSE English literature students will feature many voices that have never been on a GCSE syllabus before and represent diverse voices from living poets of British Somali, British Guianese, and Ukrainian heritage to one of the first Black women in 19th century America to publish a novel. Dr. Tracy Hayes of the Thomas Hardy Society said she was saddened to hear of the removal of poems by Hardy and Owen. She told the Times of the latter, as a serving soldier who experienced atrocities firsthand, his poems are crucial to the curriculum if students are to achieve any sense of history. Yes, John Keats. They kicked out John Keats. You think of British poets, and doesn't he pretty much come to the fore? Ilya Kaminsky, born in Odessa, Ukraine. Kaminsky lost most of his hearing at the age of 4. Okay. His family was granted political asylum in the United States in 1993. He's not British in any sense, is he? Louise Bennett Coverley. I want to talk about Louise Bennett Coverley. And I want to talk about the poem that was selected for the exam, the GCSE. And this woman, well, she moved around a lot. She was born in Jamaica. She spent several decades in Britain. And then she spent, the last couple of decades of her life in, wait for it, Scarborough, Ontario. Now, this poem is called Colonization in Reverse, and it is written in Pidgin English or Jamaican patois. And I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, but I'm just going to read it out. It's not a long poem. What a joyful news, Miss Matty. I feel like me heart gwine burrs. Jamaica people colonizing England in reverse. By the 100, by the 1,000, from country and from town, by the shipload, by the plane load, Jamaica is England bound. I am speaking this exactly as it appears on the page. I'm not looking to make a mockery of it. Dem, a pour out of Jamaica, everybody future plan is fi get a big time job and settle in the motherland. What an island, what a people, man and woman, old and young, just to pack them bag and baggage and turn history upside down. Some people don't like travel, but fi show them loyalty, them all open up cheap fare to England agency. And week by week, them shipping off them countrymen like fire, fee immigrate and populate deceit at the empire. Ooh, no, see how life is funny. Ooh, no, see that turnabout. Jamaica live fee box bread out of English people mouth. For when them catch on England and start play them different role, some will settle down to work and some will settle fit the dole. Jane says the dole is not too bad because they paying she £2 a week fee seek a job that suit her dignity. Me say Jane will never find work at the rate how she that look. For all day she stay popping and fan couch and read love story book. What a devilment at England. Dem face war and brave the worst, but me wondering how dem gwine stand colonizing in reverse. So presumably the point of this GCSE exam is to gauge how these students, many of whom will be going on to university or hope to, how well they have mastered the English language. And I don't see what possible use studying a Jamaican patois, pidgin English poem, what possible use that would be. But there we have it. You will have noticed that these poets who have been dropped, despite being, as I say, diverse in the sense that two of them were alphabet people, well, they're white. And we all know what that means. Bad, 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 bad. I really like Siegfried Sassoon's writings, particularly his novels, which were, well, they were memoirs of his life written in a novel form. And I particularly, I've read his diaries and outstanding stuff. I'll tell you a story. Siegfried Sassoon was a man of the arts, and he was a friend of Sir Edward Elgar, the composer. And he writes in his diaries that he was cut by Elgar after a concert, and he was devastated by this. Again, because Elgar was his friend. That he, after the concert was over, he went as if in a line where Elgar would be going down a hall, so he could congratulate Elgar, and Elgar just breezed past him, cut him dead. And there is a note added quite a few years later that he had subsequently learned that Elgar sweated profusely when conducting, and this disgusted him. And after he was finished a concert, he could not wait one extra second to change his clothing. And that's why he cut Siegfried Sassoon. I thought that was really a beautiful thing to read, because there's many things that happen to us in our life, and we make an assumption about what's happened, and it is often true that we are absolutely wrong about it. Let's go to Eugippius. He has a very long post, which is rather complicated, which I'm not going to read from, but I'll commend it to you. It's called Toward a General Theory of Corona and Why No Interventions Ever Seem to Work as Intended. Our attempts to manage the pandemic have presented us with a variety of problems and paradoxes. Why have lockdowns and other containment measures proven so generally ineffective against SARS-2? What causes waves of infections to begin, and why do they collapse? Yes, it turns out that it would appear there's a great deal that we don't know about infectious diseases. This is Alex Berenson's Substack, and it's a paean to Pfizer. He writes, my mom, a devotee of St. Anthony Fauci, America's doctor, found herself in atrial fibrillation following her booster last fall. The AFib passed, so come spring, she dutifully lined up for another booster. Guess what came back? And guess what has now appeared on her counter, what she'll now be taking for the rest of her life, which is Xarelto or Rivaroxaban, and made by guess who? Coincidence, of course, given her history of heart problems. Oh, wait, she had no history of heart problems ever. Well, whatevs. Stuff happens. I believe Big Pharma calls that a win-win. Not that I need more incentive to chase the truth until the sun explodes and swallows the earth, but now I have it. And this update, cannabis may now cause 1 in 4 new cases of schizophrenia in men. This stunning figure from a Danish researcher last week at a top international psychiatry conference spells a mental health crisis and a crushing blow for advocates of cannabis legalization. Like the New York Times, psychiatrists may finally be waking up to the imminent mental health disaster coming after decades of lies about the risks of cannabis to the brain. Last week at the 2022 International Congress of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, a Danish researcher suggested that cannabis might be responsible for 25% of new cases of schizophrenia in young men. This figure is far higher than previous estimates, which generally ranged from 5 to 10%. It would translate into tens of thousands of additional cases of new onset schizophrenia annually in the United States. Harmless. It's a harmless weed, we were told, and continue to be told. Let's go to the Daily Skeptic, which is branched out. Its coverage is branched out. There's not very much COVID-19 panic porn around anymore. Nadine Dorries' online safety bill highly damaging to free speech, says Lord Frost. This is by Toby Young. I should point out that this British model of speech suppression, the government's not doing it. The private companies, social media companies are going to do it, and they're going to do it because we're going to whack them with crippling fines if they don't. And prior restraint. Just have a bunch of people gang up on you and say that this is hateful, and then you are in serious trouble. And the incentive is for the social media companies to remove the content or simply to ban you forever because they do not want to pay millions of dollars in fines, which is something that can happen repeatedly. Lord Frost is one of 3 ex-cabinet ministers who have spoken out against the online safety bill today, warning of the damage it will do to free speech. He called the bill unsatisfactory and unconservative. He says it contains so many flaws it is hard to know where to start. He singles out for criticism that it will outlaw comments on social media that would be legal in the real world. The former Brexit minister said the move will be highly damaging to free speech and will benefit only the perennially offended who want to be protected from anything they disagree with. A conservative government should not be putting this view into law. The best thing the government could do would be to slim down the bill so they can proceed rapidly with the genuine, uncontroversial aspects and consign the rest to where it belongs, the waste paper basket. And it's 5:26 here in Victoria. Funny thing happened in Canada. It has been cool and wet. The coldest late winter and spring that I can remember since I've been in Victoria since 2001. Record low temperatures were observed in Victoria and elsewhere on Vancouver Island earlier this year. Temperature, didn't break 70, actually, until a couple of days ago. Now the temperature broke 80 yesterday, but it's the end of June. Oh my God, global warming. We're all going to die. Have these people forgotten that it gets hot in Canada? Every year in Canada, it gets hot. Canada is a very cold country overall, but it does get hot in the summer. But we're supposed to have forgotten that this happens. The temperature is over 80 degrees. Well, really? Wow. How about that? Unprecedented. Of course, it's not unprecedented. It was much cooler today in Victoria. So apparently, Russia is going to be divvied up by the global American empire. Sven Etienne Peterson, who is a grad student at the University of Glasgow and writes for the National Interest on EU strategic autonomy, Russian foreign policy, history, and futurism. He has a thread. I just got out of the U.S. government's first in a coming series webinar on the decolonization of Russia. Some quotes and highlights. Decolonization is about listening. This webinar serves as a space where we can hear the voices of those who experienced the trauma of living in the USSR. Okay. The USSR hasn't existed since 1991. The comments section was probably the most interesting part. There was a lot of talk about Circassia, especially. Circassia was a prosperous and vibrant nation like Ukraine until cultural erasure by Russia. It's not Russophobic, but a fact that Russian policies have erased the cultures of various ethnic minorities for centuries. The discussion was seen as outside mainstream DC discussions. Russia has traditionally escaped from being seen as a colonizer due to Western academia's sympathy for the Soviet Union. Oh, we're going to play the Cold War card here. That the country that invented manifest destiny dares to criticize Russia's move to the south and to the east is pretty rich. Problematic that the global south is still sympathetic to Russia despite Moscow's exclusion of people of color from the former Soviet space. While the West also engaged in colonial behavior, its moral authority rests on the fact that it widely discusses its past injustices as opposed to Russian society. Yes, self-flagellation. Germany was celebrated by speakers as a model example of how future Russian society would look, tolerance and inclusion. Germany's becoming a nightmare. German-Polish relations were seen as a model for future relations between Russia and its future breakaway states. Dignity, equality. A speaker, Russia is fighting for its existence like my forefathers fought Imperial Russia. We lost, but I hope Ukraine wins. Glory to Ukraine. Yeah. It's a very big color revolution we're talking about. Let's talk about cringe, okay? And when we talk about cringe, Justin Trudeau cannot be far away. This is by Ashley Parker, Matt Visor, and Jennifer Hassan, The Washington Post, and it is scarcely believable. Vladimir Putin was not in the room as a group of 7 leaders gathered in the Bavarian Alps, but the Russian president remained very much on the leaders' minds, even during a discussion of proper attire for a group photo. Hours after President Biden said the G7 nations would announce a ban on new imports of Russian gold in an attempt to further punish Putin for the invasion of Ukraine, Western leaders made jokes on the opening day of the G7 summit about how they might intimidate Putin in an unconventional way. Prime Minister Boris Johnson asked, jackets on, jackets off, shall we take our clothes off? That's a direct quotation. Ostensibly wondering how the leaders should dress for an unofficial photo before their lunch meetings began. Johnson continued, we have to show that we're tougher than Putin. This was at the summit site at Schloss Elmau in Germany. Putin was booted from the group in 2014 after Russia invaded and annexed Ukraine's Crimea region. Justin Trudeau joined in the fun. We're going to get the bare-chested horseback riding display. Referring to the Russian president's predilection for distributing photos of himself outdoors, sometimes shirtless, including on horseback. There you go. There you go. We've got to show them our pecs, Johnson added. I don't think that Boris Johnson wants anyone to see his pectoral muscles. From arm wrestling to martial arts, Putin's hobbies have sought to present physical strength and power central to his personal brand. Over the years, the Russian leader has frequently been photographed posing with his torso on full display, fodder for an array of online memes. One photo shoot in 2009 featured a shirtless Putin riding a horse in the mountains. In 2018, more outdoorsy themed shots emerged, showing Putin stripped to his waist and fishing in a Siberian lake. There were photos of Putin the swimmer and Putin the sunbather. When asked by a reporter in 2018 about his penchant for half-naked photos, Putin defended the collection of photographs. When I am on vacation, I see no need to hide behind the bushes, and there is nothing wrong with that. As the Putin commentary continued, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made a stab at diplomacy Sunday, shifting the conversation from teasing the Russian leader to an enthusiastic endorsement of equestrianism. Ah, yes, she said, horseback riding is the best, though. President Biden, who had remained silent during the repartee, finally, at the urging of his fellow leaders, swiveled his chair around and smiled for the photo. Biden opted for jackets on. It took 3 people to write this. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson and Justin Trudeau got into a pissing contest about whose private jet is bigger. Once again, I am not making this up. And Canadian soldiers in the Ukraine. How about that? Has this been brought before Parliament? No, it hasn't. Because why would Parliament have any say in this? The Prime Minister of Canada is an absolute dictator. The parliamentary system is supposed to prevent the kind of excesses associated with, say, presidential systems. But it's curious how the parliamentary system has evolved, particularly in Canada, in that the Prime Minister of Canada, even one with a minority government like Justin Trudeau, is far more powerful than the President of the United States. The Prime Minister, is supposed to be primus inter pares, first among equals, but no, he is an absolute dictator. This is from David Puglisi at the National Post. Canadian Special Forces are in Ukraine as part of a NATO network to provide weapons training and to gather intelligence about the Russians, the New York Times is reporting. Neither the Department of National Defense nor the Office of Defense Minister Anita Anand would comment on the report published Saturday that noted a few dozen commandos from NATO countries, including Britain, France, Canada, and Lithuania, had been working inside Ukraine. The United States withdrew its own 150 military instructors before the war began in February. Does anyone believe that the United States Special Forces are not operating in the Ukraine now? No, I didn't think so. And here's a Canadian soldier who is in the Ukraine. This is a cri de coeur from John Iveson of the National Post. When James Chalice rides into battle in the contested south of Ukraine, he doesn't travel to the front in an armored infantry fighting vehicle. He drives himself in a Hyundai Sonata. We get hit with machine gun fire and mortars. We have to hide them. The car's in the woods. It's been surreal, but we're using what we've got, the Canadian Forces veteran said in an interview with the National Post. Nothing highlights the paucity of Canada's contribution to the war in Ukraine more than Chalice's eyewitness account from the front in the Kherson region. I should point out that soldiers being transported in civilian vehicles that are not marked as military vehicles is a violation of the Geneva Conventions, but the National Post is not going to draw our attention to that. Why would this be a violation of the Geneva Conventions? You want military vehicles to be clearly marked so that the soldiers on the other side don't blast the hell out of every vehicle they see. It's quite simple, actually. And, oh yes, in more sanctions follies, this is from Arathi Somasekhar at Reuters. Oil rose $2 a barrel Monday on the prospect of even tighter supplies loomed over the market as the G7 nations proposed to tighten the squeeze on Russian President Vladimir Putin's war chest while actually lowering energy prices. The group of wealthy nations vowed to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, or at least until, how many people in Western Europe and Britain are going to freeze to death in the dark before this policy? There's a reconsideration of this policy, because it's going to happen. Of course, Russia is just being devastated in this war, except that it isn't. It's the other side that's being devastated. This is from John Sparks, Sky News correspondent in the Donbass, Ukraine. A commander of an elite unit of Ukrainian Marines has told Sky News the majority of his best-trained troops have been injured or killed. Speaking near the front lines south of the city of Severodonetsk, company commander Alexander said a corps of experienced soldiers who had been fighting together since 2018 have been lost. My unit was 100% made up of professional soldiers who have a lot of experience. Now 80% are incapacitated from serious injuries or death. In comments which will alarm those backing the Ukraine in its 4-month-long war with Russia, he says he does not know how long his unit can sustain such losses. I don't even know how to answer this question. It's hard, but we have no choice. Well, who are they being replaced with? People who have had 1 week's training and given an old Kalashnikov. Yeah. They don't call a meat grinder for nothing. This is from the excellent site Moon of Alabama, talking about the cauldron. And the cauldron is getting bigger and bigger, and the cauldron is about to be closed. The area between the Russian fronts is under full Russian artillery control, with drones flying above, seeing anyone who moves to escape from Lysychansk to Siversk on the left side of the map. A Washington Post report describes what happens to those who try. The Ukrainian airborne unit was relieved to be pulling back from the front Sunday morning, riding a column of armored personnel carriers away from the embattled city of Severodonetsk, which had already fallen to the Russians, and Lysychansk, which was on the brink. Nothing happened to us when we were at the front, the unit commander said. It was while we were retreating that we got hit. They were hit and hit badly. As the convoy moved into the farm village of Unpronounceable, with many of the soldiers riding on the outside of the vehicles, the first blast struck right by them. It was a cluster bomb, they would later surmise, something that tore through the contingent of men clinging to that side of one truck. Several men were wounded, with blood pouring from limbs, and in one case, a soldier's head. But there was no time to treat them while the convoy remained in the crosshairs of Russian artillery. The uninjured applied tourniquets where they could, dragged the hurt back onto the vehicles, and raced out of the village across rutted farm lanes to a line of trees across a golden wheat field about a kilometer away. Moon of Alabama comments, the claim of a cluster bomb is likely wrong. An exploding 152 millimeter high explosive artillery round spreads many fragments of deadly metal around. Whoever leads the 8,000 soldiers there should tell them to give up and surrender to the Russians. On Saturday, a Russian bomber flying over the Caspian Sea fired 4 cruise missiles into the Artem missile factory in Kiev. The Western reporting claimed that some hit a civilian building. Russian missiles hit a multi-story residential building and a kindergarten in Kiev early on Sunday, killing at least 1 person and injuring 6 others in what the city's mayor called an attempt to intimidate Ukrainians on the eve of summits in Europe focused strongly on the war. The casualties occurred in the 9-story apartment blocks in central Kiev, badly damaged by what the Ukrainian Air Force said were Russian Kh-101 cruise missiles launched from long-range strategic bombers over the Caspian Sea, roughly 1,000 miles away. A picture in the report shows damage to the upper 2 floors. Moon of Alabama comments, the Kh-101 cruise missile has a warhead with 450 kilograms of high explosives. If one had hit that high-rise building, it would be completely gone. Modern Russian cruise missiles are extremely precise, as last week's damage of the Dnieper Bridge in the Cherkasy region of Ukraine shows. The railway part that was used to transport heavy weapons is gone. The road bridge right next to it has very little damage. It is way more likely that the building in Kiev was hit by a Ukrainian air defense missile that missed its target but eventually fell back to Earth. So I guess we're going to be hearing less and less about the Ukraine as it becomes obvious that the Russians are going to win. And I suppose we could start laying bets on how many weeks it will be or how many days it will be before Zelensky flees, probably to be the head of some government in exile. Oh, yes. More Justin Trudeau news. Canada announces Rwanda embassy as Trudeau arrives for 10-day foreign trip. Because, Canada and Rwanda have always been like this. Well, a great many war criminals from Rwanda ended up in Canada. Did you know that? It's true. This is from the Canadian Press. Canada will open an embassy in Rwanda as part of efforts to combat the influence of Russia and China in Africa. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly announced Wednesday, shortly after Justin Trudeau arrived in the country, to begin a 10-day overseas trip. Yes, we know that Russia is present on the continent. Yes, we know that China is increasingly present also on the continent. We can't be naive, Joly told reporters in Kigali. She said Canada is setting up a permanent embassy in Kigali with an ambassador and will also name a new ambassador to the African Union based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And guess what? Money. Canada's run out of money, but Canada is going to be borrowing $250 million. This is on top of all the money that was poured down the rat hole in Ukraine. $250 million in food aid. Again, from the Canadian press, Trudeau announced $250 million in new food aid Thursday and blamed the growing threat of starvation squarely on Russia as he prepared to meet with leaders whose nations are feeling the pangs of famine. Well, I guess Trudeau had never heard that old saying about, poking the bear. That the sanctions, of course, are hurting us far more than they're hurting the Russians. Far, far more. Strange new respect for conservatives in my country. Well, the right kind of conservatives. The conservatives who make piteous noises about extremism and extol moderation. There have been a number of stories about a organization called Center Ice Conservatives, a voice for mainstream Canadians. And I looked at the people involved here, a bunch of people I've never heard of, except for, Marjorie Breton, who's this ancient woman who used to be a senator. I've heard of Laurie Hahn, the ex-MP. And, of course, favorite Tasha Karedin, who is actually considering running for the leadership of the Conservative Party earlier this year. Don't laugh. And Rick Anderson, who is a PR spiff, principal with Earnscliffe Strategies, but I know of him from way back. I know of him from the early 90s when he was Preston Manning's right-hand man. And this is straight out of the Reform Party playbook. Preston Manning, he was accused of leading a right-wing party, and he said, no, it's like hockey. I have a left wing and a right wing and a center. So we're back to those days. Preston Manning's Reform Party, people voted for it because it was a right-wing party. People in the West voted for it because it was a stick in the eye of Ottawa. Preston Manning never understood why his party became so popular so quickly. And then he pissed it all away. But now we're back. Oh, no, we're not right-wing. What right-wing would possibly mean in Canada is a fascinating question. Because apparently mainstream Canadian politics is not only one that celebrates the sexual mutilation of children, but makes it a crime for people to counsel, including for their parents, to counsel against the aforementioned sexual mutilation of children. Welcome to Center Ice Conservatives. We are a platform that intends to be a strong, bold, and proud voice for the center-right of Canada's political spectrum. Why are we doing this? Because we don't want the center to be marginalized and ignored any longer, and because our voice, your voice, firmly focused on the priorities of mainstream Canadians is badly needed today, more than ever. Why is that? Because woke voices on the edges of the left and populist voices on the fringes of the right are sucking up all the oxygen in what passes for political debate in Canada. And Canada is worse off for it. These loud and fringe voices dominate party politics, creating tribal divisions. Party politics or partisan politics, by definition, create tribal divisions and fierce debates over issues mainly long settled in the minds of most Canadians. Oh, like the long settled debate over the sexual mutilation of children. Because social issues, who cares about them? People's sexuality, not important. Oh, wait a minute. Don't the alphabet people say this is the only thing important about them? On the other hand, they're not really important. That leaves most of us in the middle scratching our heads, wondering who speaks for us? Who speaks for the majority of mainstream Canadians who describe themselves as fiscal conservatives with progressive views on social issues? Yeah, okay. That is not popular. That is not a popular policy. It's not popular in the United States, not popular in Canada. Who are these fiscal conservatives, by the way? Oh, we're going to bring in a balanced budget, or we're going to radically reduce the deficit? No. Who says that that's going to happen? Somehow the budgets are going to balance themselves, and somehow the debt is just going to, I don't know, disappear or something. We can just borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow with no consequences. Inflation, That has nothing to do with the creation of money. What are you talking about? Who speaks for those of us who dismay? No, that's not proper word usage. At the loud, single issue, and predictably slanted views that often dominate party politics and leadership races. Can we have some examples here? Okay. Could we get away from this boilerplate? Our mission is to become a voice for these mainstream views. It's important we're heard because the true source of political power in Canada comes from centrist, pragmatic, mainstream Canadians. In other words, the Liberal Party -5, the Liberal Party after 5 years. That's what this means. We are the swing voters and swing ridings that can swing elections. Most of us in the center have a tendency to lean in one direction, liberals on the left, conservatives on the right. But our core values, priorities, and concerns are clearly overlapping. Oh, really? So these conservatives and liberals, they share core values, do they? I don't think they do. And I don't think their priorities and concerns are clearly overlapping. When Trudeau gets cheered for going to Rwanda, it would be difficult to think of a country on earth which has less to do with Canada than Rwanda. But there we are. Here's a perfect example. This article in the Globe and Mail that Daniel Venez, a federal liberal, co-authored with me, a federal conservative, showing our common ground. There is power in the center. Every Canadian knows that, especially when it comes to hockey. A winning team needs strength up the middle at center ice. Yep, that's what Canadian culture has devolved to. Tim Hortons double, hockey, hockey, hockey. How about them Leafs, huh? Replaced with, Oilers or whatever to your taste. Our goal as center-right conservatives is to highlight people, policies, and priorities that rise above the noise and heat of the fringes and focus key issues that Canada's leaders should address front and center. You want to name some? We hope you'll follow us. We hope you'll spread the word, and we hope you'll lend your mainstream, pragmatic, and common sense voice to ours. That's from Rick Peterson, founder and director. So you're angry about various things. What things? Well, what's this extremism? Could you give us some examples? Nope. That would require some thinking. See, when the liberals get very, very passionate, when someone like Trudeau wonders whether people who are wary of taking vaccines, whether they should be tolerated. Yeah, he used that word. Well, he has strong feelings on this. But people on the right are not allowed to have strong feelings because that would be extremism. When was the last time you ever heard Justin Trudeau described as an extremist? But he clearly is. Of course, he also leads one of the most corrupt governments in Canadian history. But, come on. You don't want to get too upset about that. Oscar Toe says Gamion is female and doesn't completely mess up the chat dynamic. Respectable commenting name says you wouldn't know her. She's Canadian. Okay. Jonathan Pohl says Claire Caw isn't a girl. She is even older than me. Okay. I had some interaction with Claire Caw back in the day. I have no interest in secular Coranism. Don Willis has said, I flirted with the idea of letting her on here, but females tend to ruin any good guy fun. Okay. Seals and Croft passed. England Dan was Dan Seals, his bro. Did there some England Dan and John Ford Coley? Did I actually remember that? Seals and Crofts had a song which was deemed to be anti-abortion. Dave Marsh, who was the editor of Cream magazine and later wrote for Rolling Stone and became one of Bruce Springsteen's managers, part of the Bruce Springsteen cult, just flew into a rage over the Seals and Crofts band, demanding that they be raped navally by a snake. Yeah, Seals and Crofts. They were Baha'i, the most inoffensive band ever. But you gotta be pro-abort in the rock biz. England Dan and John Ford Coley. Yes, yes, indeed. I got it right. Love is the answer. Okay. Popcasso88 says, I wonder if I have Alzheimer's. I keep forgetting stuff. Anyone remember the UKR soldiers driving around in DHL delivery vans? Nice, says Oganzar. Yes, I do remember it, and it is a war crime. Don Willis likes George Lucas's first film, THX 1138. I don't like the birds, says Popcasso 88. Hitchcock's last great movie was Psycho. He had a bad time in the 1960s. Hitchcock did. Topaz and Torn Curtain. Yeah, I don't know, they have their moments, but they seem kind of labored. But I would say that Frenzy is Hitchcock's last great movie. It's pretty strong stuff, you know. Hitchcock was fully utilizing the new freedoms, as a woman says in the Coen brothers film, A Serious Man. It has a great, flawed, Byronic hero and a truly vile villain. It is tremendous stuff. Tremendous stuff. I'd really love to see you again. Ugh, says William Stewart. After rewatching, I did appreciate the birds. I had a problem with the birds because, vampires don't exist, right? But there's a spiritual level to this, the world of witchcraft, devilry and the like. Do witches exist? Well, I suppose it's controversial. There are a lot of people who call themselves witches these days. But I'm never really worried about the birds turning on us, Of course, this was before I was myself attacked by birds. I don't know, was that about 10 years ago? They were crows. And I've decided I hate crows. I've never seen Family Plot. Is it any good, says Palcasso88. It's not top drawer Hitchcock. However, it is funny. Okay? And Hitchcock loved his character actors. And Bruce Dern is in it. And he is excellent. People say that he's crazy in his films. He always plays a lunatic. I would disagree. I would say that he always appears bemused in his films. Barbara Harris is tremendous, attractive woman. Very, very funny. She plays a bogus, adept in the occult, a seer. Yeah, it's good. And who else is in it? One of my favorite character actors, Ed Lauter. Ed Lauter is in it. And you've seen Ed Lauter, bald fellow, many, 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 many movies. Let's see. The Longest Yard, King Kong, Magic, Death Hunt, Time Rider, Cujo, Death Wish 3, My Blue Heaven, The Rocketeer, Seraphim. The Artist. Ooh, he was in an art film. You should read the Random Rolls at the AV Club interview of Ed Lauter. Random Rolls was a great feature, and Will Harris did most of the interviews, and then they decided, a bunch of old people talking about old movies. Let's get some woke people. Let's get some drag comedians and the like, I'm an angry Chinese person. Let's talk about how angry I am. That sort of thing, Let's. I think that's it for today. I guess I'll have to put off a discussion of Jacques Ellul until tomorrow. And I saw the birds with a hipster audience that mostly laughed at it. Ballad Fellow would be a excellent rap name, says Don Willis. Strangers on a Train. Well, of course, that's one of the classics, one of the classics. You know, Farley Granger was homosexual, and I don't know whether this was, of course, Patricia Highsmith wrote the novel. She was a homosexual. I don't know if, you know, Farley Granger, of course, was in Rope as well, and there's a very strong, you know, homoerotic subtext to that movie. You could say the same thing about Strangers on a Train. It's your big head. Okay. The birds represent the ladies of sexual frustration, says Oscar Atoe. And Carol Burnett will be on the final season of Better Call Saul. What, really? That's according to Palcasso 88. You know, they show her her series, her 70s series, I guess late 60s too, on MeTV, which is the old man TV channel, which I have my TV tuned to most of the time. When I was a kid, I thought it was absolutely hilarious. I can't bear it. I just can't bear it. Now, they cut out all the corpsing, as they say in England, or breaking, where, you know, her and Harvey Korman and Tim, what's his name, would just, you know, they give up any pretense at reading their lines and just double over in laughter, you know. They wisely got rid of that. But it's just essentially the same gags over and over and over again, with them just being run into the ground with no subtlety. Or you're not even, you know, the kind of anarchic joy that you would get from the Three Stooges or Abbott and Costello. And there's one where Tim, what's his name, he plays a boss, and Carol Burnett plays some sexy Swedish secretary who's horrible at her job. It's the same joke every single time in the same location. Yeah, so no. I can't, and I get this sort of nasty negative vibe from Carol Burnett. You know, she's, you know, everyone loves Carol Burnett, etc., etc. I don't know, and you know, I've seen her in other things since that time. There's a very sharp edge to her. I didn't notice that until fairly recently. You know, Jonathan Pohl says. Yes, about Claire Haw. She is a UK citizen of Chinese ethnicity, originally from Malaysia. Do you like Kipling? I was reading about Donald McGill, the postcard designer. George Orwell wrote one of his most famous essays was about Donald McGill. And so, do you like Kipling? Asks a young man of an Ask woman. And she says, I don't know, you naughty boy. I've never kippled. I believe that's been used in several other contexts. Okay, so it's a Polanski film from the 60s. Which one is that? Huh? Tim Conway, yeah. Picture this, a Romare with killer bugs. Polanski's film with Catherine Deneuve's sister, who died young. Donald Pleasance is in it. I know a lot of people think highly of it. It's just an absolute mystery to me. I have no idea what they were going for there. I like Knife in the Water very much. A Cul-de-sac is the one I'm talking about. And yeah, Francoise Dorléac, just a stunningly beautiful woman, Catherine Deneuve's elder sister. And it's just, okay, so it's a French film, or French-Polish film, and you've got Lionel Stander in it and Jack McGowan, previously mentioned in this space. It's a very weird cast, and you know, the ethnic differences, national differences between the cast members, they really stand out. Oh, I see that Mary Keane, the other great Irish actor, is in it, as well as a young Jackie Bissett, which is always a plus. Did I ever tell you in the Casino Royale movie, the first one, the independent Casino Royale movie, that Peter Sellers was in it, and he dropped out because he actually thought that they were going to let him play James Bond straight, you know, and that was never the idea. And he finally twigged to this, and he dropped out about, I don't know, half the way through. So the movie makes no sense, really, narratively. And they used he would be joking around on set, and he'd make a funny voice and talk about a race car, and they stuck that in the movie. Okay. So Jackie Bissett is in the original Casino Royale, and Peter Sellers was an exceedingly nasty and vicious man, accidentally shot her in the face with a blank round at point blank range. Kevin, have you seen Clive James's interview of Polanski? It's on YouTube, says Anra. No, I have not. I will check it out. And yeah, I mentioned the film Fearless Vampire Killers. I saw it not long after it had come out. I don't know. It seemed a little labored to me. Maybe I should watch it again. I'll just say this. When I was 13, 14 years old, I thought that Casino Royale was the funniest movie that was ever made. You know, there was no VHS tape then, no DVD, no Blu-ray. So I saw the film at a local theater in Lynn Valley, North Vancouver, many, many times. And a friend of mine would go, and we essentially memorized the movie. That's what people used to do in those days. And we just, say some red Chinese generals screaming something like 50 million tons of rice, which I just thought was hilariously funny for some reason. It is a very long movie. It's got a whole bunch of directors in it. The narrative doesn't make much sense. The John Huston part, the first part, which is shot in Scotland, is interminable. But on the other hand, the original Casino Royale might hold the record for most beautiful women in one movie. I rewatched it, some years. Burt Bacharach's score, Burt Bacharach and Herb Alpert, great combination. I have a sort of sentimental attachment to it. I mean, it's kind of dumb, but lovable. Yes, the Niven Casino Royale and the Woody Allen. Woody Allen is in it too, and Woody Allen is quite funny in it. I think it was Charles Feldman was the producer. He was a famous agent. He produced the film, and there's a story which I'd like to believe is true that Peter Sellers very badly behaved on set, left the film. Woody Allen has a major role in it, and he wrote a lot of jokes for it, wrote part of the script. So the story goes that Charles Feldman, who was an elderly man at the time, he would confuse Peter Sellers and Woody Allen. So he was in a restaurant in, New York or London or whatever, and he saw Peter Sellers, and he walked up to him and he said, Mr. Allen, I just want to thank you so much for your hard work on Casino Royale, and we really appreciate it, and you weren't a jerk like that, Peter Sellers. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it as always. I shall be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.